morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Friday, October 14th, 2016. I am Dave Biddle, very happy to be joined by the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. Bax, let's go over some of the high points from Urban Meyer's always entertaining call-in show yesterday. I like to do that on the Friday BM5. Some of the high points, let's start with Nick Bosa, or as Coach Meyer calls him, Nicky Bosa. He very impressed with the way Bosa's playing. Meyer said this is the plan. They wanted to get him more and more snaps each game, and by October, mid-October, November at the latest, have him ready to go full speed, and they feel like they're on track. And they feel like not only are they on track with how many snaps he's playing back, but just how well he's playing. They feel really good about Nicky Bosa, and we can see that he was part of that fourth down stop against Indiana. And I just think he's going to continue to get better and better. And it's funny, some fans were wondering, is he going to be as good as Joey? I think he is going to be as good as Joey.
What's really interesting is that Nick was actually a higher-rated recruit than Joey was coming out of high school, which is hard to believe seeing Joey Bosa go out and play the way he did it at OSU and then the NFL. But this is a young guy who, look, the guy tore an ACL 10 months ago and he's playing this way. I can't put into words how impressed I am with Nick. Little Nicky Bosa. Which is hilarious because he's really not, he may be bigger than his brother actually at this point, but I tell you what, you're Ohio State, it seems like every single year, at least one true freshman offensive line or defensive lineman goes out and becomes a big time player. There's a long tradition of this. I mean, think about all the true freshmen who have played well. Johnny Simon, Jonathan Hankins, you've got, Joey Bosa himself, Michael Bennett, Tommy Shutt as a freshman was his best year. Cameron Hayward as a freshman. In the last 10 years, seems like every year there's one true freshman who goes out and by the end of the year is a key cog in the rotation on the D-line. And when you recruit at the level OSU does, I guess that's just inevitable. But Nick Bosa is a guy who, down the stretch here for the Buckeyes, can become more and more and more important. And it's only a good thing a guy like him is stepping up because remember the start of the year whenever Tracy Sprinkle got hurt and we were terrified about the depth on the line? That's not as much of a concern anymore. The D-line has played so well to the point that they still haven't given up a rushing touchdown this year. So Nick Bosa's development is one of the big bright signs for a defense that's full of Kliegleites right now.
One staple of the Urban Meyer call-in show, other than callers saying "Love you, brother."
Love you, brother.
We didn't have that yesterday, but we usually have that. But every week, Meyer talks about Paris Campbell. This week, of course, no different. Last week, he was on the money. He said at some point he's going to break a long touchdown, or he didn't say a long touchdown. He said a long kickoff return, and that's exactly what Paris Campbell did against Indiana. The 91-yard kickoff return looked good doing it. And every week Meyer talks about Paris Campbell. Last week he said, I'm not shy to say Paris Campbell's one of my favorite players on the team. And so, I think this kid, we've now seen what he can do as a kickoff return. I think he's going to continue to get better and better as a wide receiver. So, Urban Meyer cannot gush enough about Paris Campbell, Bax.
Yeah, and Paris Campbell's a player that, the way Urban talks about him versus the way the casual fan talks about him is a complete 180. Most fans before that kickoff return, they knew Paris Campbell for the guy who turned the ball over twice at Virginia Tech, and we never really saw much more of him, right? So he's a guy who I feel like the way Urban's talking about him right now, still to a lot of people, it's kind of like the Dontre Wilson freshman year hype. But Paris Campbell's a guy who came to OSU a year younger than most of the kids in his class. He's still kind of physically developing, and you saw what he did in that kickoff return. So the ability is there. I mean, he didn't just take the kickoff return job for no good reason. Urban gives people jobs based on merit. So when Urban's talking them up, you have to pay attention. Go back to the spring when everybody talked about was Malik Hooker, and Urban was talking about Malik Hooker, or a couple years ago when, hey, man, this Darren Lee kid's going to be pretty good. When Urban starts talking about somebody, when Urban starts gushing about somebody, it means that player's pretty darn good. And we haven't seen that out of Campbell a lot yet. I have to think if Urban's talking them up this much, that Urban doesn't just hype kids for hyping them. Urban talks them up because he's genuinely excited about what they can bring to the table. So let's hope Paris Campbell can actually keep bringing it to the table in some games because, we're getting into, I believe, his third year now at OSU here, and we're finally getting to see him.
He also talked up Brandon Bowen. That's another common thread over the last couple of weeks, talking to Greg Stodrala or really anybody on the offensive staff. They say, the backup offensive line overall might not be where we want it to be, but Brandon Bowen is where we want him to be. And Meyer called him the sixth man of the offensive line, and very impressed with Brandon Bowen. And he did add that, Matt Burrell is close, meaning close to being a guy that they feel good about. Matt Burrell right now would be the seventh guy, and he mentioned Brady Taylor as well. So not the depth that the Buckeyes would want, but fortunately, Matt, that these guys have been able to stay healthy up front as far as the starters, and also fortunately, they really like Bowen stepping up as that sixth man up front.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're telling me Brady Taylor, I get nervous just because we haven't really seen much from him in the games, and when we've seen him in the games, he looks a little small, and his snaps usually aren't very on point. But Burrell played well against Rutgers. That was one of the things I noticed in garbage time. And Bowens obviously came in here and there and played pretty well. I think the backup O-line is still going to be a concern all year depth-wise, though I'd love to see Malcolm Pridgeon get back to practice soon. That would be great. That give us a little more hope to have a couple guys who aren't more than warm bodies behind the starters. But it's nice to see, again, some of these guys who maybe this year wasn't their time, but a guy like Brandon Bowen's young. A guy like Matt Burrell is young. They've got 3 or 4 years left in the program at this point, depending how long they stay. And so some of these guys could end up being big-time players in a year or two, and the Buckeyes need another starter. Let's not forget Jamarco Jones in one more year after this is gone. You have Pat Elflein for this year, and that's it. Billy Price is a junior. I assume he'll be back because guards don't leave early for the NFL. But, in a year's time, you're going to start needing some of these guys to be starter-level players. So when you have backups that are very good and very young, that's a very good sign.
On the defensive line, Urban Meyer mentioned he's very impressed with Draymond Jones and Robert Landers. Now, Robert Landers, no surprise there. He's been playing well all year. He looks like, I really think he needs to be a starter. I think he's been more impressive than Draymond Jones. But Draymond Jones is coming off a good game, definitely coming off his best game. But just more good news there. Urban just talking up these guys, these young, redshirt freshman defensive linemen, Draymond Jones and Robert Landers. Your thoughts on that?
Well, Landers has obviously been in the backfield practically every play. I mean, talk about a kid who, was right on the cusp of not getting offered a scholarship to go to Ohio State. I think he was committed to Kentucky or somewhere ridiculous like that. I don't remember for sure. But he was a very lowly rated recruit, and OSU took a shot on him late in the process, and he ended up coming here to Ohio State. And I agree with you. In fact, I think he's been the best defensive tackle we've had this season. And remember when Tracy Sprinkle went down? Everybody looked at each other and went, oh, crap. All right, let's see what we have. Hopefully we have somebody here. Draymond Jones was really the only highly rated guy. I mean, Devon Hamilton and Robert Landers were both 3-star kids from Ohio. They're the kind of kids that Urban really has taken a lot of from their recruiting profile. Well, at this point, you have to be super confident in what you're getting from some of these young guys. I mean, Larry Johnson has them in a position where they've stepped into the lineup seamlessly. You don't give up 0 rushing touchdowns in 5 games if your defensive tackles aren't playing at an extremely high level. And right now, that's what we're seeing. You have to give Mike Hill credit for being the steady presence inside as the veteran here, too. But these young guys are playing, and these young guys are playing well. I agree with you, Landers is the better of the group, but you have to have depth at this position. And, again, Urban's talking about these guys because they're doing well, not because he wants to provide any hype.
I think Mike Hill's playing really well, too. I'd like to see Mike Hill and Robert Landers out there together, a lot.
Together way more, yeah.
Down. Yeah, those two together. I know they're both one-techs. Robert Landers is undersized for a one-tech. That's what he is. Exactly. And, for people to say, well, they want to get a 3-tech and a 1-tech out there together. Well, in 2014, when they won the national championship, they had a couple of 3-techs out there together with Adolphus Washington and Mike Bennett. It's all about getting your 2 best defensive tackles on the field. But, hey, the bottom line is these guys are playing well. I like that they have a deep rotation. Guys are staying fresh, but I just think Landers, however many snaps he's getting right now, I want him to get about 5 to 10 more per game. I just think he's, as you said, he's just been in the backfield almost every play, it seems like. Okay, brass tacks. Let's give some Ohio State-Wisconsin predictions. Buckeyes favored by 10.5. The spread opened at 9.5. So the money's going toward Ohio State. It raised to 10 after a couple of days. Now it's up to 10.5. So the money's going toward the Buckeyes. Your thoughts? How will this play out? What will the final score be, Bax?
Well, my litmus test, and I've been saying this for weeks in the bucket, is can a team score 30 points on Ohio State? Because that's how Ohio State could lose a game, is if a team has that capability, right? There's no way Wisconsin has that ability. Watching Wisconsin play, they're going to try to one-dimensionally run it. They're going to try to one-dimensionally run it. They're going to try to one-dimensionally run it. Against an Ohio State team in 5 games that hasn't given up a rushing touchdown. To me, Wisconsin is a darn good college football team. They're probably going to approach 10 wins this year. And they're not in the class of Ohio State. That 10-point line to me isn't high enough. I think we're coming off a week against Indiana where people are a little nervous because the passing game wasn't great. But you know what? Ohio State still should have had 45 points at the end of the day if the referees don't take that Malik Hooker touchdown off the board at the end. So that's another good sign of, hey, you're going to have to score a boatload of points to beat the Buckeyes. And the type of team, the profile of team is going to beat the Buckeyes. Sure, they play good defense like Wisconsin. Wisconsin can hold OSU to that around 30 mark. But Wisconsin's going to be lucky to score 10 on this Buckeye defense. I mean, are they going to throw the ball? Because they have a freshman quarterback who isn't particularly adept at throwing the ball. I look at this game to me, and I think it's the kind of game that's going to be, you know, a 21-7 kind of game at half, and then Ohio State ends up winning comfortably like 35-10. I feel really good about this one for the Buckeyes. And I think this is the kind of game where, you know, you're going to see Ohio State go into a respected opponent on the road. They're going to come out of there with a very consistently strong victory. You know, one of those quote-unquote game control metrics is going to love them. And people are going to start talking again about, man, that Indiana game sure was a little closer than we wanted, but, man, this team really is as good as we think they are. And I think that's the moment that you see Ohio State play this way. It is officially going to be this Saturday night. Let's not forget, Urban Meyer has never lost a true road game in 4.5 seasons as the Ohio State head coach, and his teams are always ready for the night games, the big games, the primetime games. The games where they kind of look, those are the noon and the 3:30 games against lesser-name opponents. Buckeyes will be ready for this one. I think they come out and win. My score prediction is 35-10 Buckeyes.
I like it. I have a little bit of a closer game, but I still have the Buckeyes winning and covering. I have the Buckeyes winning 31-17 Saturday night, Camp Randall Stadium. Can't wait for it. Great stuff as always out of the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. Really appreciate it, Bax. You can catch his column every Sunday. It's The Bucket. And I hope everyone has a great day and a great weekend. I know you'll have a great weekend if the Buckeyes win, so let's hope the Buckeyes can get the job done. Thanks again to Bax. Thanks to all the listeners. Let's hear some Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.